Welcome to Golden Black Live, our December edition, and our one show for the month, and it's action packed today. We got Ray Davis in segment 2, and Jimmy Hyams as well. Talk Tennessee, really, and Purdue as we look forward to the Music City Bowl. But we also have Brian Newbert and Tom Dienhart in segment 1 to talk. Busy week, even though there are no games in Purdue sports and in Purdue football and basketball. I want to thank Triple X on the hill, but on the level, a Purdue tradition since 1929. State Farm agent Trent Johnson at trentismyagent.com, and Hilton Garden Inn when tomorrow is a big day. State HDI tonight. Brian, I'm going to start with you. The Boilermakers have a challenge tomorrow at in Indianapolis when they face Butler, the 7-3 Butler team, in a venue that Purdue, at least a tournament, I guess, or an event that Purdue has struggled over the years. That doesn't mean having anything to do with tomorrow, but Butler always presents an interesting challenge just because the way they play, and Purdue certainly are coming off finals week. You never know exactly where the Boilermakers are going to be, but what do you see coming out tomorrow?
Yeah, I think finals week is a little bit different nowadays than it used to be. Yeah. I don't think these guys are necessarily all spending hours and hours preparing for their Scantron tests. You know, I think these guys have fewer and fewer finals every year and a lot of group projects and things like that. So I don't know if it's as mentally draining as it used to be, but you know, one thing about Butler, and they've got to stop changing the name of these buildings for my sake.
Yeah, what is it?
Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Gainbridge Fieldhouse. We just did the whole Jersey Mike's Arena thing at Rutgers.
Well, that's why I didn't mention it, because I didn't know I couldn't pull it out.
Gainbridge Fieldhouse. When you gain a bridge, I guess. Anyway, the one thing about Butler that you always have to be on top of is you have to play with some toughness. You have to play with some intelligence. And you know, I think that, you know, Purdue has some things they really need to show they've gotten better at following their swing out east. And one of those things is, you know, kind of, I don't know if I want to say playing the right way, but taking the right shots, not turning the ball over, being more cohesive and being more connected on defense. And I think this is a big game for Purdue to show that the bad week it had last week, and every team has its ups and downs, its good weeks and bad weeks. Purdue had a bad week last week, and it'll be I think it'll be a tell for Purdue in terms of where they're going from here. If they clean some of those things up in a very short period of time here after getting back from the East Coast, I think that Butler is a really good opponent for Purdue to be facing in this situation, because they're going to put those things to the test. You got to be tougher than Butler. You have to be as smart or not smart or smarter than Butler. It doesn't matter who the coach is. It doesn't matter who the players are. That has been something that has stood the test of time year in and year out against this particular program.
Yeah. Tom, I let you look at firing a question at Brian, and I'll come back to you a little bit for a little bit of football stuff.
Yeah, Brian, obviously a chance for Purdue to continue to build on that momentum against they built beating NC State, I guess, in overtime in Brooklyn. You know, I guess just, you know, your thoughts moving forward, maybe what you're looking for from this team as they try to finish up non-conference play with some momentum.
Focus, stuff like that. You know, it's possible. It's always possible that NC State game could be a springboard too. That's not to say Purdue is necessarily not at the top of its game. Obviously, they didn't play very well out east. I mean, they're the number 3 team in the country, so how much upside you still have is probably pretty minimal. But that could have been, you know, sometimes bad losses linger with people, but sometimes good wins can linger with people too. You remember the Arizona game in Atlanta a couple of years ago that sort of sprung them toward that 19-game winning streak. Well, that NC State game was like Hulk Hogan back in the day, where you would think he's beat, you know, and then he's down on the mat, but he starts huffing and puffing, stands up, the crowd goes wild, and, you know, he ends up pinning the guy. And that was essentially Purdue's Hulk Hogan moment there. And maybe that momentum carries, you know, into these games to come. Now, you get through this Butler game. Obviously, you have some smooth sailing here for a couple games with a bunch of games you have to win. You physically can't lose. You can't lose to Incarnate Word. You can't lose to Nickel State, people like that. But it would give you a little bit of opportunity here to, I guess, kind of straighten some things out that could resurface when you start playing credible opponents again. And I think, Purdue just has to get better because of its struggles out east. And I think, as I said before, this will be a good game to illustrate exactly what Purdue did in a short period of time in terms of course correction, because those were two pretty flawed performances out there between Rutgers and NC State. They weren't very good, but they were good enough to escape both times. And that they got away with it against NC State. They did not get away with it against Rutgers. But the Rutgers game will be a win long-term if Purdue cleans some stuff up because of it.
Yeah, good point. Tom, obviously a busy week. You're covering practice as the Boilermakers get ready for Tennessee in December 30th in Nashville. But really, a lot of the storyline this week is recruiting, and Brian will weigh in on this as well. Transfer portal, fascinating that Purdue has, I think it's 7 as of this. Maybe it's even more since Thursday. But the fact that Purdue has once again aggressively, and that maybe like everybody else in high Division I college football. What's your take on that and some of the new names that Purdue may have come next year that could make a big difference for this roster?
Yeah, since Sunday, Purdue has added 6 guys from the portal. The 7th, of course, you go back to Samson James, who came in August. So 2 cornerbacks, 2 receivers, 2 running backs, and an offensive lineman. And they're not done yet. Jeff Brom was asked about that this week, one of his availabilities, and always willing to add a good offensive lineman or a good defensive lineman. I think an edge rusher is a priority. I think they'd like to get somebody, a veteran presence, maybe that could help them with the pass rush. And again, the 2 linemen, I think maybe a tackle. Who knows, with Bryce Austin going to the portal, maybe they want a defensive tackle too. So bottom line is this, Brom said this as well. They're always willing to take any player regardless of position if they think he can help them out. And just to back up a little bit, Brian wrote about this really well this week, and I've heard other people talk about the general craziness of what's going on right now. This calendar needs to be spread out. I know Brian thinks signing day should be moved up. Others want it moved all the way back. I mean, you got free agency going on right now. You got signing day going on right now. You're coming right out of your season. You're preparing for a bowl game. Coaching staffs are getting hired. It's just there's so much going on right now. It's kind of crazy, and you want to have these staffs and whatnot keep everything straight. But I don't want to digress. Alan, you're right. The portal is always going to be a big part for Purdue. Brom did say too that the high school kids are always going to still be the foundation for the program, but again, they always are going to want to supplement with portal guys. And last year, as a point of reference, they brought in 8 guys from the portal. They had 10, but they lost 2. The one kid from Florida had a health issue, and then of course Marcus Cushney committed, then flipped to Florida State. So we saw 8 last year. We're already at 7 now. And again, I wouldn't be shocked that maybe we can see as many as 10 when it's all said and done once again.
Yeah, Brian, the new normal, and you wrote about that, and just the fact that it is just nuttiness. I mean, in terms of all this stuff converging at one time, it's got to be almost more than. I know, Jeff Brom, they get up there on Wednesday at signing day press conference, and he's cool, calm, and collected, but it's got to be just a complete cluster in terms of being able to deal with this and all the things that you have to, and getting ready for a bowl game. And this is a program, Purdue, that's not going through really a coaching change, obviously. How do you view that and try to tie this all together of what we're going to see in college football for the foreseeable future?
Well, this is essentially college football salary cap. I mean, you pretty much have to have that sort of eye put on this at all times. You have to manage your scholarships on a year-to-year basis. What's kind of funny about this is, since they passed a temporary policy that will soon become permanent, I'm quite certain, where you can replace up to 7 guys that you lose to the portal. So college coaches have very little incentive to keep guys in their
Mhm.
programs. I don't know where the APR fits into all of this. I know that was a huge concern for coaches in terms of if we're going to allow open transfers, is this going to penalize us from a retention rates and graduation rates perspective? But for several years now in college football, it's moving more and more to this model where it's not about the 4 and 5 year developmental
Yeah.
paradigm anymore. It's more about the year-to-year roster management and the filling holes, and that seems antithetical to the nature of football. Football has always been a developmental game where you bring guys in your program, you redshirt them, you develop them, and you see what you have in year 2 and year 3. Now it's like, let's go get as many difference makers in the high school ranks as we can get who can play right away. And then let's get a bunch of transfers and all those other high school kids. Let's take those guys, see what we have, but understanding full well a year from now, half of those guys might be in the portal anyway. It really, the high school recruit is less important now than he has ever been in the history of college football. And it's only going to become less important. Now, that said, if you get a David Bell, if you get a George Karlaftis, if you get a Rondell Moore, obviously those guys are still critically important. Right. And those are the guys that Purdue has to keep kind of honing in on to get to put on the field right away. Other than that, I think the sales pitch of come here and play early is probably losing some of its luster because it's only credible for the really special guys. Because if you go recruit a mid-level kind of linebacker and say you can come play for us right away, you might sign that kid by telling him that, but then in the middle of the signing day press conference, you might get a commitment from a transfer who's going to cannibalize his early opportunity. It's just such a mess. I mean, it's there's no going back now, but this is an entirely different ballgame than it used to be. And whoever is able to best navigate this is going to succeed, and whoever resents it and whoever, is slow to acclimate to it, they're going to get left behind.
All right, and we got Jimmy Hymas in the next segment talking Tennessee. But Tom, the Boilermakers obviously are getting ready for without. And that's another piece of news this week, though it wasn't surprising with George Karlaftis and David Bell being out. Any vibe on the early end? We know that Tennessee's going to have a big crowd. It's already supposedly a sellout for the Music City Bowls. Purdue's allotment, I just found out yesterday, about 7,000 fans. They sold all those tickets, but there's going to be a lot fewer Purdue fans at this game than there was in 2018, just because of the supply and demand. But any vibe what you're seeing in terms of early on in practice and what we may see come a week from Thursday when Purdue plays against Tennessee?
Who knows? I mean, talking to Jimmy Himes and a couple other media members down there the last week or so, and could be a fun game for fans. Could be a lot of points.
Yeah.
Offense. No disrespect to Purdue's defense, which has been pretty darn solid all year. This is a Tennessee offense, the likes of which they haven't seen. It's tough to prepare for. Talked to Mark Hagan this week about some of those issues, the quick tempo. I guess Tennessee averages more plays per game than anybody in America. You do your best to simulate that, but you really can't in practices. So, and of course, we learned too that Tennessee jumps on teams quick. I think their first quarter scoring is off the charts. So they have a good veteran quarterback, a dual threat. On and on it goes. We know about Purdue's weapons. Tennessee's defense is not spectacular. So again, it could be a fun game. Purdue is going to be the underdog, and maybe they can go down there with a chip on their shoulder. I think, guys, both teams are motivated here. How often do we hear when I'm watching the bowl game, the guys on TV will go, well, I'm not sure if this team really wanted to be here, and I want to fall out of my chair. See, I thought this was the zenith of the season. This is what you played for, what you lifted weights for, was to get to a bowl game. And then you get there, nobody wants to play. Coaches leave. It's crazy. But I think both these teams, guys, because of the rise of Purdue, want to get the 2018 taste out of their mouth. And Tennessee's on the rise. They're in their home state. They want to build on that momentum under their first-year coach, Josh Heupel. I think both teams will have plenty of motivation. You combine that, like I said, with the offenses, and this could be a real fun game.
Yeah, absolutely will be. And we'll have a lot more on the site with that. Brian will have a lot more basketball too. It's a busy weekend, and not to mention recruiting, et cetera. So guys, thank you for your insight as always. We will be back for segment 2, Jimmy Hymanson, and also Rafael Davis, Big Ten Network analyst, and of course, the former Purdue Defensive Player of the Year, an outstanding player, guy that maybe is you can credit a lot of Purdue's turnaround here in the mid 2010s to Ray Davis and the job he did. He'll be joining us in segment 3. Have a great have a great weekend, guys. You got nothing going on, so we'll look forward to that, and we'll be back in a couple minutes on Gold and Black Live.